Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to crack open a chapter of the Bible that's surprisingly relevant to our lives, even thousands of years later. We're going to be looking at the time of King Solomon and explore 1 Kings 9, a chapter that grapples with those really big questions of leadership ambition and the consequences of our choices.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I think, this chapter really captures a pivotal moment in Solomon's reign, right? He's just finished building the magnificent temple in Jerusalem,
Mhm.
which is a huge symbol of his power and God's presence. And you might think, oh, he's at the peak of his success, right?
Right.
But there's this real tension bubbling beneath the
Yeah,
surface.
it's not just a celebration of achievement. It's like God saying, okay, Solomon, you've done well, but this is just the beginning. The
Yeah.
real test is what you do next.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of the covenant comes in, right? God appears to Solomon and reaffirms this agreement that was made with his father, King David. And it's this powerful reminder that blessings aren't unconditional. Solomon's continued success, his dynasty, the fate of Israel, it's all tied to his obedience to God's laws.
There's a real weight of responsibility here. It's not just about Solomon's personal success. His choices are going to impact an entire nation. So what are some specific examples in the text that highlight this idea of conditional blessings?
Well, one thing we see is that God promises Solomon an enduring dynasty if he walks in the footsteps of his father David, right? And it's all about maintaining integrity, upholding justice, and remaining faithful to God's commands. But there's also a flip side to this promise, right? The text is very clear that turning away from God will lead to destruction, and not just for Solomon personally, but for everything that he has built his kingdom, his legacy. Even the magnificent temple itself could crumble.
It's interesting how the chapter balances these two seemingly opposite ideas, the celebration of Solomon's achievements and this stark warning about the consequences of straying from the path.
Right. I think it's a powerful illustration of this principle that our choices have consequences. And Solomon's story is like this really powerful example of how our decisions, even seemingly small ones, can have this ripple effect impacting not just ourselves, but the people around us and even future generations.
It's a sobering reminder for any leader, really.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get too bogged down in the warnings, I do want to highlight the incredible things that Solomon accomplished. We see him building cities, expanding trade networks. He's partnering with Hiram of Tyre, sending ships on these exotic voyages to Ophir for gold.
Oh, yeah, those voyages to Ophir, those are remarkable. I mean, think about it. This is centuries before the age of exploration, and yet Solomon is establishing these trade routes that stretch across these vast distances, bringing back unimaginable wealth and resources to Israel.
It really paints this picture of a king who is so ambitious and driven, and it's easy to get caught up in the glamour of all these achievements, but it also makes you wonder, is there a potential downside to this level of ambition? Is there a point where the pursuit of success can actually become a distraction from what truly matters?
That's a crucial question, and the text does hint at some potential pitfalls, right? We see Solomon relying very heavily on forced labor for all of these grand projects, and his lavish lifestyle and massive expenditures raise questions about whether his pursuit of grandeur might be overshadowing his commitment to justice and fairness.
So even in his success, there are these seeds of potential problems. It makes me think about how even today we can get so focused on achieving our goals that we can lose sight of our values or the impact our actions might have on others.
Exactly. And that's really what makes this ancient story so relevant to us. It's this timeless reminder that success isn't just about reaching the top, it's about how you get there and what you do once you're there. It's about recognizing that our choices do have consequences, and that true success involves balancing ambition with integrity, compassion, and a commitment to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, it feels like we've uncovered this hidden tension in Solomon's story, this push and pull between ambition and responsibility.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he's this visionary leader. He's expanding his kingdom, building these magnificent structures. But on the other, there's this warning listing that it could all come crashing down if he loses sight of what truly matters.
Yeah, and that tension is something that I think we can all relate to, right? I mean, we all have dreams, ambitions, things we want to achieve in life. But how do we actually pursue those goals without, compromising our values or losing sight of the bigger picture?
It's like that age-old question. What is true success? Is it about those outward achievements, the accolades, the material wealth? Or is it about something deeper, something more lasting?
Yeah, I think Solomon's story really challenges us to kind of redefine our understanding of success. It reminds us that true success isn't just about building things, it's about building a life of integrity, a legacy of faithfulness, a world where justice and righteousness actually prevail.
And it brings us back to this idea of the covenant, this agreement between God and humanity. It's not just a historical footnote. It's this living, breathing concept that's just as relevant today as it was back in Solomon's time.
Absolutely. The covenant is not just a set of rules, right? It's an
No.
invitation to a relationship with God, a relationship that's built on trust, obedience, and this mutual responsibility. And that relationship is really at the core of what it means to live a life of faith.
It strikes me that 1 Kings 9 isn't just about Solomon's personal journey. It's about the spiritual journey of an entire nation. And in many ways, it reflects our own collective journey as people of faith. We're constantly navigating this tension between our human desires and our longing for God's guidance.
Yeah, and I think that's where this idea of conditional blessings comes into play. It's not about God punishing us. If we make mistakes, it's about recognizing that our choices have natural consequences. When we align our lives with God's will, when we seek His wisdom and guidance, we open ourselves up to blessings, and not just for ourselves, but for the world around us.
But it's not always easy to stay on that path, is it? Life throws us curveballs. Temptations arise, we make mistakes. Does the chapter offer any hope for those times when we inevitably stumble?
Well, what's so beautiful about this chapter is that even in the midst of all these warnings, it really highlights God's grace and mercy. There's this underlying message that even when we stray, even when we fall short, there's always an opportunity to return to the right path, to seek forgiveness, and to kind of recommit ourselves to living in alignment with God's will.
It's that theme of redemption that I think makes this ancient story so powerful. It reminds us that we're not perfect. We're going to mess up, but we have a God who loves us unconditionally and who offers us that path back to Him when we stray. That's incredibly encouraging, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a message of hope that transcends time and circumstance, no matter where we are in our journey, no matter what mistakes we've made. We can always turn back to God and experience His love, His forgiveness, and His guiding presence in our lives.
So it's not just about avoiding the negative consequences. It's about embracing the positive possibilities that come with living a life that's aligned with God's will.
Exactly. And those possibilities are really limitless. When we align ourselves with God's purpose, we tap into the source of strength, wisdom, and guidance that empowers us to live lives of meaning, impact, and lasting significance.
It makes you think about what kind of legacy we're building. What kind of impact are our choices having on the world around us?
That is a powerful question to consider. If Solomon's grand temple, this, physical structure built to honor God, could be built up or torn down based on his obedience, what does that say about the spiritual temples we're building in our own lives?
Yeah, it's almost like we're being challenged to kind of look inward, to examine our own
Yeah.
building projects and ask ourselves, am I creating something that's really going to stand the test of time?
And that's really, I think, where our faith comes in, right? Because ultimately, the foundation of any lasting structure, whether it's a physical building or a life well lived, is built on something beyond ourselves.
Right. I mean, 'cause you think about all those verses in the Bible that talk about, building our lives on the rock, on a solid foundation of faith and obedience to God.
Mm,
It's not about creating this perfect, flawless structure. I mean, let's face it, we're all human. We
yeah.
can have cracks and imperfections.
Yeah, it's more about, I think, recognizing that true strength comes from acknowledging our weaknesses and seeking God's guidance and allowing Him to be that cornerstone of our lives. That's what allows us to kind of weather the storms, overcome the challenges, and just keep building even when things get tough.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's like Solomon's temple. It wasn't just a testament to human skill and ingenuity. It was really a symbol of God's presence among His people. And in the same way, when we invite God into our lives, when we allow His Spirit to kind of guide our choices and our actions, our temples, they become something more than just personal achievements. They become reflections of His love, His grace, and His power at work in the world.
And that's what makes this whole conversation so inspiring to me. It's not just about avoiding mistakes or striving for some unattainable standard of perfection. It's about recognizing that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves, something that has the potential to bring beauty and hope and lasting transformation to the world.
So for anyone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by the challenges of life, who might be questioning their own building project or maybe feeling a little discouraged by setbacks, just remember, you're not alone.
Yeah.
We all have moments of doubt. We all make mistakes. But the beauty of faith is that it offers us this constant source of renewal and forgiveness and strength.
And I think the story of Solomon reminds us that even when we stumble, even when we make choices that lead to, negative consequences, there's always a path back to God, a chance to kind of rebuild, to start fresh, and to create something even stronger and more beautiful than before.
That's a powerful message to end on. So as you go about your day, dear listener, we just encourage you to reflect on the temple that you're building. What foundation are you laying? What values are you prioritizing? And most importantly, are you inviting God to be the cornerstone of your life? the guiding force behind all that you do.
Because ultimately, it's in surrendering to his guidance and aligning our hearts with his will that we discover true purpose and lasting joy and the strength to build something that will not only stand the test of time, but will also leave a positive legacy for generations to come.
That's it for this deep dive into 1 Kings 9. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this ancient text with us and discovering its surprising relevance to our lives today. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep building.